Last week on Don't Talk TV, in connection with the children of neo-Nazis being apprehended permanently by the state back in 2008 in Manitoba, I considered it an extrapolation, or I proposed an extrapolation to how that case might apply to people who are opposing the teaching of certain LGBT ideologies and the promotion of doing transgender surgeries and other interventions on children without parental consent, and how that might apply to the Million Person March that's in fact happening as I film this episode on the 20th September 2023. I decided to do a follow-up episode because as I thought about that, I don't think we're actually in the point of extrapolation. I think we're essentially already there, and we're going to look at that on today's episode of Don't Talk TV. And just a reminder again, if you want to see me with a handlebar mustache again, get your friends to like, share, and subscribe. Do it yourself. If we get to 10,000 subscribers before the end of 2023, I will regrow that. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. Now, I'd initially planned for this week to talk about the so-called hate gate and how the RCMP and CSIS expended billions of dollars in following up on a joke, that being Diagolon, at the behest of the anti-hate network. But as I was thinking about that, I realized there's a follow-up that's needed to last week's episode, because I suggested in that episode that maybe we weren't quite there yet, where people needed to be worried about their children being apprehended by the state if they were something other than a full-blown neo-Nazi, or a neo-Nazi in the format of what we saw last week. So this is a bit of an impromptu episode, but I think it's very important to be mindful of the reality on the ground and be mindful of what passes for conservatism. And because a lot of people think that the Conservative Party of Canada maybe is some sort of solution to this, there'll be some refuge, they wouldn't do what Trudeau's doing. But remember Bill C-4. We're going to look at that, and we're also going to look at a few things in relation to this Million Person March and some of the reactions we've seen to that. So let's go straight to Bill C-4. Viewers may not remember this particularly well. It happened a little while ago. It received royal assent on December the 8th of 2021, after only receiving third reading on December the 1st of 2021. So this just raced through Parliament at lightning speed. What is this bill all about? The summary gives a very clear picture of that it's an enactment that amends the criminal code to, among other things, create the following new offenses. And the ones that are most important for our purposes are A, it's now a criminal offense to cause another person to undergo conversion therapy, and B, do anything for the purpose of removing a child from Canada with the intention of that child undergoing conversion therapy. So you can't do it here, you can't go somewhere else to do it. What is conversion therapy? The definitions are always absolutely key in the law. So here is the definition that's been added to section 320.101 of the Criminal Code. So it states that conversion therapy means a practice, treatment, or service designed to A, change a person's sexual orientation to heterosexual, B, change a person's gender identity to cisgender, C, change a person's gender expression so that it conforms to the sex assigned to the person at birth. D, repress or reduce non-heterosexual attraction or sexual behavior. E, repress a person's non-cisgender identity. Or F, repress or reduce a person's gender expression that does not conform to the sex assigned to the person at birth. Now, for greater certainty, this does not apply if the practice, treatment, or service is not based on an assumption that a particular sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression is to be preferred. So in other words, all of these things are fair game if you are trying to repress, for example, repress a young person's cisgender identity. You can do that. You can change a person's gender expression or try to change a person's gender expression if it's not conforming with their biological gender. Just for a couple of examples. So it only works one way and not the other. Then conversion therapy The penalties for that is that it's an indictable offense, maximum 5 years jail, or a summary offense. Now, I go back here. I mean, this is a very broad definition. A practice, treatment, or service. This clearly encapsulates any practice. It would include talking to your children. It would include teaching your children from a religious perspective, for example, that, say, God made us all man and woman, or God made you the way you are, or suggesting that homosexual activity is immoral. That is all made illegal. Going to a priest giving advice in the confessional would be illegal under this statute. So when we consider what is considered a hateful ideology that might be worthy of apprehending children, well, if it's specifically criminalized like that in the criminal code, I would suggest we're already there, that not only could you be thrown in jail for trying to teach your children, say you have religious beliefs, that you believe that homosexuality is wrong, you could be thrown in jail for attempting to teach your children that, because that would be a practice. Then I think it's not a stretch at all to suggest that if you can be put in prison for teaching that, you could certainly have your children apprehended for teaching that under this rubric that we saw last week of it's causing emotional damage to the child. I referenced the lightning speed with which this passed through Parliament. Here's the journal publication for Wednesday, December the 1st, 2021, from the 44th Parliament, first session. There was a motion that day with respect to Bill C-4. By unanimous consent, it was ordered that, notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, Bill C-4, an act to amend the criminal code, conversion therapy, be deemed read a second time and referred to a committee of the whole, deemed considered in committee of the whole, deemed reported without amendment, deemed concurred at the report stage, and deemed read a third time and passed. Unanimous. Every single member of the Conservative Party of Canada was part of that unanimous passing on consent. They bypassed second reading, they bypassed third reading, went straight to the Senate. Obviously, the Senate blasted it through as quickly as possible as well for this to get royal assent 1 week later. This is very important to consider. People have seen, I've had Maxime Bernier on the show a couple of times. I don't consider myself a partisan member of the People's Party of Canada. I don't even hold a membership in the People's Party of Canada. But I certainly don't think that the Conservative Party of Canada is conservative at all when they do things like this. And people need to remember this when they think that maybe Pierre Poilievre is the great hope, the great savior of Canada. He did that. He was one of those unanimous people that voted that way. Then we have the Million Person March that's going on right now. It seems like there's some pretty good turnout. We can see from these videos. These are videos that have been sent by friends of mine from Halifax and from Kitchener. I'm sure it's similar in other cities. That just happens to be where I know people. Now, what is the response to that? We know that there's counter-protesters there. And now this is very important in considering, again, could being a member of this protest be considered hateful activity that might require, in the eyes of the state, the apprehension of your children? In that regard, it's very important to look at what the Canadian Anti-Hate Network has to say. This is a government-funded organization that played a huge role in HateGate, which I referred to, and we'll look at that hopefully next week. They're not only government-funded, they essentially tell the government and police what to do. Now, they claim that they're a non-partisan group, but you'll be able to see as we look at their website a little more, they clearly have very partisan principles. I suppose they'd claim they don't prefer either the Liberal Party of Canada or the NDP, but they clearly have a very partisan bent here. They counter, monitor, and expose hate-promoting movements, groups, and individuals in Canada. So what do they consider hate-promoting movements or groups? And we look at their parent site, antihate.ca. You've got the Million Person March right here, very visible. They're talking about the Million Person March. Now, here's important. These protests are supported by a big tent of far-right and conspiratorial groups, including Christian nationalists, COVID-19 conspiracy theorists, sovereign citizens, and anti-public education activists. So you can see they're calling these groups all far-right conspiratorial groups. So if you're in favor of homeschooling, far-right conspirator. Now we look at their education tab. I recommend that people have a look at their Confronting Hate in Canadian Schools booklet here. This gives you a lot of ideas of what they're targeting, what they say is bad. And again, the government essentially does what the Anti-Hate Network tells them. If we look under ideologies here, the first one that they've got is white nationalism. You can look through that for more details, but it's very important to see what are the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, what are they saying is hate? They're the ones who essentially define for the government what is hate, and what they target is what could result in people's children being apprehended. We saw during the Freedom Convoy, again, another example where people who disagree with the government are at risk of having their children taken from them. Just quickly, we have this CBC article from February of 2022 titled "Large Number of Children Among Protesters Hampering Response, Police Say." So it says here that Constable Bell, or maybe he was chief at that time, I forget, he turned his focus to the children of protesters. Over the weekend, bouncy castles were set up near Parliament Hill to help entertain the children who remain. Bell said police are working with the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa regarding those children, telegraphing that we might take your kids, because what else are you going to engage Children's Aid Society for? He went on to say, it's something that greatly concerns us. We'll rely on the Children's Aid Society to help provide and give us guidance around that. We think it's an important factor that complicates and makes this an even more challenging operation. And in the statement, the Society, CIS, confirmed that it's working with Ottawa Police and said it has a duty to investigate allegations of abuse and whether a child may need protection. So we see that clear link, investigating whether children need protection because they're with people who disagree ideologically with the ruling government and probably the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Have we ever seen comments like that in respect to Black Lives Matter marches, Pride marches, All Children Matter marches? No, absolutely not. So you can see who they're focusing their attention on, and that's why I say we're not at the point of extrapolation. It's essentially already here. So people need to consider how to govern themselves. As I suggested last week, consider when is it prudent for you to broadcast your beliefs to the public. Of course, this video isn't legal advice. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer so you can get specific advice on these topics. You can call another lawyer or myself. My contact information is below. As always, please send us recommendations or requests if there's something you'd like to hear me talk about, and please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media if you found this video interesting, helpful, or informative, and if you'd like to see us reach 10,000 subscribers and for me to regrow my handlebar mustache.